Paul Tweed, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
No problem at all, Matthew. Glad to be here.
So you could fact check me a little bit here. You know, you can't trust everything you read on the internet, and certainly you of all people know that. But I know you as you've been dubbed as a celebrity lawyer. You've represented people like Liam Neeson, Justin Timberlake, Jennifer Lopez, Ashton Kutcher, Harrison Ford, Nicolas Cage, Britney Spears. You've done it all. You don't have an office in Hollywood. You don't have an office in LA, but you have an office right here in Belfast and another one in Dublin. How am I doing so far?
Going great. One in London as well, but just add on and then get the full works.
So I'm delighted to have you here. We've been doing the show for 5 years. We're about episode 330, and I first came across your name right around like the 80 episode mark. And I just remember always walking past. I used to live on the Donegal Road, and I would walk down the Dublin Road, and I would see a wee plaque that had your former office premises on it. And it just always was in the back of my head. So delighted you're here. If you could just take couple of minutes just to explain your background, how you got into this weird and wonderful world of being a defamation lawyer and the media presence that you are.
No, look, no problem. I, like most teenagers, hadn't a clue what I wanted to do, age 16, 17. My mother was getting increasingly impatient with me. I was really only interested in rugby, football, tennis, squash, any sport at all. And she put pressure on me. She said, look, I want you to go to university and I want you, whatever you want to do, that's up to you. Still couldn't make up my mind. She had been a legal secretary in her former life. It was the only connection we had with law. And she said, look, let's try law. You've got to try and do law. I'd be really, really pleased and proud if you could do that. I said, well, whatever. I had no real, as I say, aspirations either way. So I applied to do UCA for various universities, including Queen's. Queen's was the only one that gave me an offer. This is during the height of the Troubles, of course, in the late 70s. Nobody really, I told myself nobody wanted us. It really was because I hadn't got the qualifications to be offered an Oxford place or whatever. So I got into Queen's, and the same way I had managed a school, I scraped my way through. I'm certainly never been academic. I've just always been able to do enough to get through. All the way through Queen's, and then I went into the Legal Institute. I was the first year of what was known as the Institute of Professional Legal Studies. Before that, you qualified as a solicitor or a barrister through apprenticeship or pupillage.
Oh, interesting.
And so the barristers and solicitors qualified together, and that was in 1978. Again, I managed by the skin of my teeth to scrape through there, and I came out and I didn't, where do I go? I had no job
You've reached
offers.
the end of the conveyor belt. It's like, right, what's the next thing? It's a wee bit unclear.
Yes.
This episode is part of our ongoing series with NI Connections, where we interview an interesting person from Northern Ireland who's living and/or working overseas. Now, who are NI Connections? They are the diaspora department of Invest NI, and their mission is really, really simple. It's to connect the Northern Irish community all around the world. They put together some really incredible resources, including how to move you and your family back home if you have been living overseas, how to move to Northern Ireland for the first time, and even how to move your business or open up a new branch in this wonderful place that we call home. You'll also can find hundreds of interviews and profiles with fascinating people who are proud to call this place home, and you can check out all of these things and sign up for their free email newsletter at niconnections.com. Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's episode.
So anyway, I just followed the pattern. My mother was scanning the jobs. So a job was advertised in the Belfast Telegraph by Johnson's, a law firm that specialised in conveyancing and corporate work. I hadn't a clue what that was. Applied, got the job. At this stage, I had run up an overdraft of £13,820 with no idea how
Which
it was
is like
clear.
50 grand in today's money.
At least. And I was but I was always very confident. I may not have had the academic ability, but I had supreme confidence, which I now realise I had stupidly. But anyway, I was offered the job, the grand old annual salary of £2,500.
And you were rolling in it.
So that rolling in it, absolutely. Couple of weeks into it, I thought, I can't do this. I was stuck in an office and doing stuff. There was very little litigation in the firm at that time. And that was sort of gave me some sort of appeal for me. I thought, can't do this much longer. So I started to apply for jobs that appeared in the Tuesday edition of the London Times, including first one I applied for was Governor of the Solomon Islands. I thought that'd be quite exotic. Get me out of Belfast. Didn't get a reply to that one. Then the next one was to be an IP lawyer. That's intellectual property lawyer with distillers, looking at trademarks. Didn't know what IP was at that point, but I applied. got an interview, got a test, failed, and got unceremoniously dismissed. Then I kept going, and I am quite resilient. I then applied for a job in the Cayman Islands and with W.S. Walker and Company. And Mr. Walker himself came to London to do interviews, and much to my astonishment and excitement, I got a letter saying, please come for interview at the Cavendish Hotel in London. Now, in those days, it was a massive thrill for me to get on a plane to London, and somebody to pay for that flight was just unbelievable.
Wow.
He did that, and we had an absolute brilliant lunch, really enjoyed it. He was a bit of a character, and he just said, look, I have no intention of offering you the job, Paul, but I just want to see who on earth and why anyone could have the balls to apply for a job when they're only a matter of weeks or months out of law school. And I just wanted to speak to you to see, and we did, and with great crack.
Unbelievable is that?
I got my, my free lunch and trip to London, got back, and needless to say, I didn't get the job, of course. But then I started to just explore around in Johnson's. I thought, right, I just can't, transactional work and office work just did not appeal to me. But a few of my friends were getting down to the courts and they were litigating and they were acting for insurance companies. And I thought, this might be quite good. And I was very fortunate that there was a very, very well-known senior counsel, one of the top lawyers of his day, Bob McCartney, who was friendly with the senior partner in Johnson's. And he was very good. He actually referred the first sort of insurance company into us, and I sort of got stuck into that, the work, tried to learn by my mistakes, and then I saw that a lot of the very successful law firms were getting a lot of work because they were getting close contacts with the claims managers, getting the claims managers to get to know them, taking them out for lunch. So I, with my overdraft still escalating rapidly at this stage, I used my own money to take these guys out for lunch.
And where's the wine and dine spot then?
Then it was Thompson's Restaurant in Arthur Street, long since closed, but that was the place to go in Belfast during the Troubles. And I actually enjoyed the company of these guys, and it worked quite well. And eventually, within just over 9 years, I built up, I think, 13 insurance companies, and it became one of the top defence insurance practices in Northern Ireland.
Safe to say you cleared your overdraft.
So, well, I sort of did because I wasn't a partner yet at this stage. I was doing all this on my
you were
own.
doing the proper.
And again, I had expectations, but there were all sorts of issues between the two partners. One wanted me, and the other one was very old-fashioned, didn't like insurance work. I think he regarded it as beneath him. He was a corporate lawyer, and for whatever reason, he may or may not have been right. But to cut a short story long, eventually there was a dispute between the partners, to get me in. I was brought in as a partner, continued to build up the firm. But just in 1986, the same Bob McCartney, he and another top QC, a guy called Des Bowl, who was one of the top criminal senior counsel today, were accused of fighting over the last chocolate eclair in a Hollywood cake shop. That's Hollywood, Northern Ireland, by the way, not California.
1L.
We haven't got to California yet. And we sued the Sunday World. The case was driven by Bob McCartney. I knew very little about defamation. Yeah. He, albeit he was a client, was like a larger-than-life character, absolutely charismatic, forced on, and he came from a very poor working-class background. In the witness box, was able to, the Sunday World had goaded him all the way up to the hearing, but he was able to relate to a 7-person working class jury, and they got him. They understand why. Okay, it's very trite to say, oh, who cares, fighting over a last chocolate eclair, but people were ridiculing him, saying, hide your buns, here comes Mr. McCartney, that sort of thing. Yeah. And for somebody of his stature, it was critical that his credibility was maintained. Now, he had a great sense of humour, but this was something that they goaded him. They goaded him and goaded him. Big mistake. They were awarded $50,000 each, which was a massive sum in 1986. It wasn't. They attempted to appeal it. The appeal didn't proceed, so they were left with the money. Then through Bob again, I got introduced to the late Barney Eastwood, a bookmaker, promoter, successful businessman, absolute character, and he became a wonderful friend of mine over the years. But during that period, he was fighting with the boxer Barry McGuigan. There was a raft of litigation in the late 80s, emanating from McGuigan losing his world title in the Desert Heat of Las Vegas. And he claimed he'd been injured, whatever. And eventually there were a number of libel actions and quite a bit of litigation going. And then a big case appeared in 1991 where he basically brought out a video saying that he'd been put into the ring with an injured ankle. That case, Barney Eastwood and I went out to the States, interviewed all the witnesses, referees, judges, trainers, physios, everyone. We even interviewed the physio for the LA Lakers basketball team.
Class, yeah.
we met everyone, and the case ran in Belfast. I had a very, very, I would say, an intense dislike of McGuigan's solicitor, who I would blame for everything in many ways. But anyway, the long and short was one of the judges actually commented that the correspondence between me and my opposite number was far more defamatory than the actual subject libel in the video. But anyway, vicious case, fought. We had given, Barney had said, look, he would take a payment to charity. His son, unfortunately, had died tragically in the RVH, and he said, look, if you make a donation to the RVH intensive care unit, that's it.
Yeah.
Case is over.
Wow.
They scorned that.
Crazy.
Absolutely. Case ran for 5.5 weeks, longest in Northern Irish, probably Irish legal history, certainly at the time. And again, a 5-person working class jury heard all the evidence, were able to say, everyone thought we were going to lose. Yeah. Everyone. I even had a judge coming over to me at one point, a neighbour, saying, look, you're young, you can't win this case. And I was utterly confident, because with Barney, we had spoken to all the witnesses. Like, we knew we were fine. But anyway, the 7-person jury agreed with us. 450,000 record damages, and it was very significant because there was an issue over a marker, and that figure 450 was very significant. So the jury were making a point.
Wow!
And it was an total and absolute vindication of Barney Eastwood. And as I say, we remained great friends. It was epic crack. We litigated then various issues over the years. Always won.
Really?
Every single one. And we had hearings before the British Boxing Board of Control, different things, and we always come out on top. And I'm not claiming credit for that. That's the credit goes to the sheer backbone of Barney Eastwood, the backbone of people like Bob McCartney, people who had absolute, and I learned from that. And so, as sort of a below average academic, I suddenly realised there were 2 things you needed to be a successful media lawyer. Probably a successful lawyer, but particularly a successful media lawyer. And that was judgment and backbone. There's another word beginning with B that I normally use in these circumstances, but in case there are families, young people listening, we'll say backbone. Those are the 2 qualities. Never mind about whether you have a first-class honours degree in law from Oxford or whether you have read legal books, textbooks, cover to cover. Those 2, if you do not have both of those qualities, you will never make a successful media lawyer.
And so judgment, you mean being able to look at a case, look at all the data in front of you, and just know that you know this is going to go the right way for us.
Exactly, and making the right call at the right time.
Wow.
Some cases need to be settled at a certain stage. Others are better. You're better running them to get them aired.
That's a really interesting point. Okay, so you get a case. That's a hypothetical scenario. Producer Rosca here. Someone's defamed him, and he's in court, and you're his lawyer, and someone comes and offers him, "I'll give you 100,000 just to go away." How do you know? No. We can keep this going. There's maybe 300,000 on the table here, and we're going to this, we're going to that. Versus like, do you know what, man? You should take the 100,000 and get out while you still can.
Again, and that is a really good example, Matthew, of a judgment call, because you've got to always think ahead. I always say to people, if they come into me and they say to me, "How much is this worth? How much is this libel worth? How much am I likely to get in damages?" I know that's a very bad omen. That's a very bad sign, because you should only go into libel courts to vindicate your reputation. Now, sometimes you need a big award to vindicate your reputation, but sometimes, an apology or a vindication in terms of people acknowledging the truth are far more important. If you're good in to play the libel lottery, that's a big mistake.
That is an amazing point. Wow. Yeah.
So you've got to always remember that. And again, even now people still come in, and I always know that's a big warning sign, whenever you get that. Whereas other people come in, and these are the big stars. I mean, the Hollywood stars that I've acted for over the years, they just want the record set straight.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. One, obviously to protect their brand, particularly in the era of Instagram. They need it done quickly. They need to get whatever is out there completely removed worldwide, the false statements. They don't say to me, I want 500,000.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works.
Yeah, they're like, mate, I can make 500,000.
Yeah.
But my brand is worth 1 billion. I don't need 500,000. I don't need it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And so that principle applies right across the board. I mean, obviously the cases like, I can name drop for the UK and Ireland if you want, but at the end of the day, all these cases it doesn't matter who the person is, whether it's a shopkeeper in Cornmarket or whether, it's an international superstar. The issues are the same, and I'm a bit like the dentist. People don't come to me because they love me. People don't even come to me, for any reason other than they've got a particular problem at a particular moment in time.
Yeah.
And they need it sorted quickly. And many of the people, famous people that I've acted for over the decades, most of them won't even know my name now.
Sure.
To get it. Now, there are others, there are exceptions to that. I mean, I've become very good friends with a number of very, very successful movie stars and people in the music business. But for the most part, we're service providers. And we just provide the service, but it's unique. It's got to be quick. I mean, most people, whenever a lot of my colleagues are either on a Saturday morning or out on the golf course, I'm battering away to try and get stuff pulled from the Sunday papers, or on a Friday night when I'm looking at that chilled bottle of, Sancerre wine that I would just love to have a couple of glasses of. I've got to push it to one side until I know the phone stopped.
Wow. And if you don't mind me sharing, before recording, you mentioned, today you were up at 4 a.m., you're on American time. It's like, what it means to work. Yeah. And like you say, there's a lot of people, they'll get a certain level of success, a certain level of money, and then they'll kind of be like, okay, this is great, take the foot off the gas. I want to ask you, at what point in your career, because, there's famous people and then there's famous people. At what point was there a particular case where it was so high profile that you started to get kind of pulled into the media vortex? So I'm thinking in my head, I don't know if any of this ever happened, that the reporters are taking pictures of you, or the reporters are throwing stuff about you, that it's so high profile that you're kind of brought into the tabloids and the journalism and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what has happened actually, it's got worse, or beyond that, I should say. I mean, we're involved in very contentious litigation at the moment. And I've had a situation where I've had people following me, photographing my family. I've had, according to the Sunday Times, attempts to try and hack into my emails. I've had clients having their offices bugged. I've had various situations whereby I know there's attempts to access phones, because as you know now, all they need is satellite up there. The old days of Watergate are long gone.
Yeah.
But and I know exactly here. This is a very, very powerful. So I'm scared to just say anything at the moment, because there's litigation pending. I don't want to prejudice that.
Of course,
but I've had to put a complaint into the UN Special Rapporteur for the protection of judges and lawyers. I've had to make complaints to police. That's the level it's got to. In terms of my profile, I tend to be, I try to explain to people, I'm associated obviously with my clients, because most of my clients want publicity for the apology, want a publicity for the vindication, simply to mitigate the damage that's already been caused. And my name, I'm normally doing it for them.
Yeah.
So people would tend to associate. So like, I've been accused of being, like, I act for everyone, all the political parties here in Northern Ireland. Most of the leaders I've advised at some point or other, and same in the Republic of Ireland, and same in England. I do work in France. I do a lot of work, obviously, in the States, in terms of working with US attorneys who either send work to me, or I work in the reverse with them. But, my name then would tend to, come up, in the media at the same time. Does me no harm, particularly as younger. It's good marketing, and it's good for the client. It's the client. It's provided the client wants it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have many hundreds of clients I act for. Nobody will ever know. They will go to my grave because of, obviously, client confidentiality. But there are others who want the profile out there and need the profile out there, quite understandably, to get that vindication.
So it's really interesting. You got into this media landscape, this defamation landscape. Is libel the right word to use? I'm not even really familiar.
No, it's defamation. Defamation is made up of two potential factors.
This is really good, Paul. See, while you're on this bit, could you actually explain, again, a really simple example. Roska sitting here. What do I need to do to defame him versus insult him?
Okay. Well, you could just call him, for instance, a crook.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just do it that way. Now, a crook is a specific allegation. It's an allegation of criminality. You could also call him an idiot. Now, the second one is mere vulgar abuse.
Yeah.
That's not actionable. The first one is, because you are seeking to undermine his reputation.
Interesting.
Okay, provided he's not a crook. You're not a crook. But so that's, and then defamation is made up of libel, the written word, the permanent form, and slander, the spoken word.
Right.
Slander is much more difficult to prove for obvious reasons, but it's non-permanent. Whereas libel can take the form of, a broadcast or newspaper report or something.
So it's recorded, documented. You can refer back to it. So if I turn around and I call him a crook on this podcast that's liable because it's documented and it's recorded.
Yeah.
Okay, really interesting.
Congratulations if I get in trouble.
Yeah, he's going to come to you after.
Yeah.
How much is this worth?
Exactly. I can just
And you're going to say you didn't listen.
No,
You did not listen.
I did listen, and that's the fine.
So you got into this really through a chocolate eclair allegation.
Yeah, it just got into the media stuff like by sheer coincidence.
So
by sheer
what
fact.
was it? You know, you do the chocolate eclair case, you get into the box and stuff. Like, how did you just feel like this is my zone? This is where I want to be. What was it about it that just gave you the buzz?
I loved it. I mean, you couldn't compare it to anything else in the world. I mean, that's what's kept me going at my stage. I mean, I love the hunt. I love being able to find solutions. I love somebody to say, they're dead. You have no chance of winning that case. That is the best scenario I can
That's
have.
the dog in the bone, is
Yeah,
it?
and you do it. And now we've moved on, of course, away beyond like the print media. We've very few cases against print media now. It's now primarily social media and the online search engines. Moving on to AI. I mean, AI is going to be the big bogey for the future. You know, we are often, the platforms still use the defence of, in this side of the Atlantic, the e-com directive. That's an EU directive, which effectively is, they claim gives them protection that they're not a publisher. In the United States, it's Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is basically supposed to give a get-out-of-jail-free.
And is that basically that, hey, it's not us, it's our users posting this, you can't hold us accountable?
We're not a publisher, basically. So it's this issue, you know, we're a platform, we're not a publisher.
Yeah.
And we have a number of cases pending, which is going to be testing that again. I think it's absurd. I mean, there's no difference, in my opinion, between something posted on Facebook to a reader's letter in the Belfast Telegraph. Mm-hmm. Belfast Telegraph are responsible for anything they publish in terms of from a reader. They're meant to vet it, check it for libel. What possible difference could there be in a posting on Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah. Let's kind of unpack that a wee bit, okay? So let's say Corn Market in Belfast City Centre, Spirit of Belfast sculpture, you know, the big swirly bit just in the middle there. So if I'm a social media company and I say, you know, well, we're just a public space, we're just a town square. Mm-hmm. If I go and I print a big, sorry, Roscoe, we're picking on you a lot here. If I print a big poster up with Roscoe and has a picture of his face and it says, you are a crook on it, and I, you know, not staple it, I would stick it to that sculpture, then I am liable rather than the town square.
Of course.
So what makes you have such strong opinions that, no, the social media company is absolutely liable if they could take an argument like that?
Because they're facilitating, they're disseminating the libel. Let's do another example.
Yeah, please.
You buy a book on Amazon.
Yeah.
And Amazon, their first thing will be, we can't check every book. Mm-hmm. And we're just a distributor. So they're different from any other distributor in the world, any other publisher. They're different. Now, in fairness to them, they do have a point on the first one, and the law protects them in terms of they're not expected to check every book. But once they're put in notice of a book containing defamatory content, they're on notice and they can't say, well, we can't check every book. You don't have to check every book.
Yeah.
You've been told what's in that book. You've got to look at that book.
Yeah.
And as a result, we're saying it's defamatory. The ball's in your court.
Interesting.
And that is an issue that's been debated quite a bit. I mean, I've absolutely 100% that they are responsible. Once they get to that point, they should. And it's the same applies to Facebook and Twitter and all the other sites. You know, once they've got to be given an opportunity. I mean, they can't be expected to check every single post to go up when it goes there. But once they've been put on notice, once they've been told, once they know it's there, it's not for them to say, oh, look, we'll wait for a court hearing. That's what we normally get back. You know, wait till the court, 18 months' time. And they continue to disseminate the word and then it becomes pointless. Yeah. But that is what their stance is, you know. And so the whole thing's absurd. And AI has then pulled the rug out from all even those arguments, because what the AI are saying now is, it's the same people. It's Google, Microsoft, Facebook. They're all behind the AI scenario. But they're saying, oh, we're not responsible for a robot. I mean, we've had a situation where, I act for a lot of publishers as well as for plaintiffs. I act on both sides of the coin. And one publisher contacted one of these AI platforms and basically said, look, can you name any senior Irish legal figures who've been accused of abuse? And they named actual people. And this is on the AI platform comes out, and it cited a newspaper report dated the 14th of March in the publication that was making the inquiry in the first place. no such report existed. Totally, absolutely.
That
totally
is interesting because we've used ChatGPT a few times.
Yeah.
Even something simple like, okay, we have a little device in the corner there called a Stream Deck, right? And if he pushes a button, it can turn all the lights off in the studio and all. And we asked it, give me a step-by-step guide on how to set this up. It was total nonsense. It just pulled it out of thin air, but it wasn't actually real. But it looked like it was the truth.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Totally.
It's such a bad liar as well.
Exactly. but why? So say it's for ChatGPT's Microsoft, or well, they're a 50% owner of OpenAI who own ChatGPT. So why should they not be liable? Why could we? And particularly with its foreseeability now, because I've had various tests, and it's going down. So they know the warning. So that's going to be the challenge of the future. That's what we're working on at the moment, to try to get that preempted, because it is going to be a serious problem. See, the difficulty is, it's all very well that particular publisher doing the test, and they were doing specifically the test to see what might come out.
Yeah.
But if you're one of the senior legal figures that they've named, and somebody else picks this up, and then suddenly it starts to get legs, that could destroy careers.
Yeah.
Could destroy reputations for life. And it's never, the trouble is, it's a bit like the Kevin Spacey situation yesterday. And I was commenting on it in various media. Like the big problem is that, the no smoke without fire situation, even with a clear verdict, a jury verdict, you get people, because there's been so much going on, your reputation never really recovers from it.
Yes.
I mean, I've asked many people, if you may recall, like a number of years ago, quite a few radio DJs were accused of sexual abuse and personalities. I bet you can't name me the ones that were accused that got off, that were told they were totally innocent.
The brain saves the salacious information permanently.
Yeah. And once they're associated, they'll be just one of a number of names who are in it.
Yeah. To the point where if you want to defame somebody and you pick a certain, a sexual accusation is perfect, because it is so hard to rub off your record.
Totally.
Even if you are 100% innocent.
Absolutely. Particularly, with the background of the Me Too movement, you're assumed guilty until proven innocent. And we've also got, I've been a subject of disinformation campaigns, again, from these particular opponents I'm talking about. And, they're coming at me, and should be reasonably well equipped to deal with it. So what chance, somebody who's not familiar with the way these scenarios work, it's very, very difficult to envisage a situation where there's going to be a surgery, a specific type of surgery that will deal with it quickly enough to stop the damage.
It's really, really interesting. I want to go back to what you said about distributors and Amazon, because it kind of helped unlock the argument you were making about how these people are responsible. Because the reality is, if Amazon sells a book, or if a post blows up on Facebook or any of the other social media platforms, the nature of their business models is they are profiting off things that are not true, things that are defamatory. Yeah,
astute point. And that's but more so, say for the sake of argument, you look at YouTube, and YouTube are a big problem, right across the board. Now, to be fair to Google, they'll say, look, we'll comply with any court order. And they do. There's no doubt about it. If it's a court order, we will comply in the jurisdiction that you get it. So, a court order in Belfast not going to do you a lot of good in Switzerland.
Yeah.
But anyway, they do that. But the problem you have with all these situations, once it's out there, once, the thing is out there, you either have to get a worldwide solution. It's no use getting for one jurisdiction or, over another. And they're sitting there saying, look, look, that's fine. But what worries me is that the person who's posting the disinformation on YouTube is just one example. On any of the sites, they're getting paid.
Yeah.
They get paid for posting disinformation and defaming other people.
And the way the platforms are set up, and Roscoe knows as well, Roscoe's a whiz when it comes to YouTube and things like that, is the more explosive, it's like tabloids, the more explosive and salacious and in some ways untrue the content is that you're put out, the more attention you'll get, the more money you'll make. And it's just a big kind of cycle in that way.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, very astute point. Just taking a note here. But yes, no, that's absolutely right. And this is the absurdity of the whole situation, and that yet nobody, I certainly get the feeling that governments either feel that they don't want to scare the platforms away
Yes.
because they've obviously come in, particularly into Ireland. They've come in for tax tourism reasons,
Yeah.
not libel tourism, note. Or, you know, they actually, these platforms have a bigger financial war chest than most governments. I mean, you know, we had President Biden, you know, hosted the main players in the AI platform world last week. I mean, have a look and see what come out of that. I mean, I'm still trying to find, like, what? And then their strategy now is, I mean, their approach, I should say, whether it's strategy or not, but they're talking about, you know, the future. We've got to have safeguards for the future. I'm worried about now.
Yeah.
I'm worried about this very moment now.
Yeah.
And yet they can push the issue right back.
It's crazy because I'm kind of sitting here and I have a picture in my head of like, you're kind of in the business of trying to put the genie back in the bottle. It's a very, very hard job. And the more we get into it, the harder that job's going to be.
Exactly.
So whenever they say, yeah, let's sort this out for the future, it's like, are you going to even be able to?
Yeah, totally. And the scenario has changed completely. I mean, the genie will be out and down, like, you know, around the world about 5,000 times. But then they'll be having a laugh. They'll not, but definitely laughing at everyone. No, and that is just the big problem. And we've got to try and, you know, as a society, we've got to face it, because I would not have any confidence in any government whatsoever taking appropriate action. Having the will to take the action, never mind the ability.
Yeah. I want to kind of speak a little generally here. Something I love to do whenever we have people like yourself in the studio is kind of apply it to just like everyday people going to work, doing their thing. How can we keep ourselves right whenever it comes to things like defamation, things like libel, like give us a little bit of best practice in general terms of how we can keep ourselves in the right?
Very simple. Think before you tweet. Simple as that. Nothing more need to be said.
My granny would be proud of you. That's great. Very, very good. I want to go back to two words that you said earlier. Supreme confidence. Where on earth does that come from?
I have no idea, and I didn't realise I had it. It just is there. I mean, I've never once worried about paying that overdraft off. I mean, you know, with hindsight, I must have been mad. I mean, you know, there was no guarantees that I could make any sort of success in the law or in anything, for that matter. I mean, I wasn't. But I've just known, I don't know, I've always felt destined for something. I know it's an awful corny thing to say, and people will be laughing. But,
great thing to say.
But that's what driven me, and it still drives me on, but I still think there's a lot more in me to be able to do much more, achieve more.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've never been frightened of taking it. Maybe it's the old boy from Belfast scenario comes in that, you know, everyone keeps repeating this phrase, like, while I coming to somebody from Belfast, these international stars. But, you know, there's very few things that would scare me off. In fact, if somebody tries to do it, that actually gets me the other way around. But quite often we get American attorneys saying, I'll see you in court, or we'll do this, do that. And going, yeah, I'm trembling in my boots, you know. I've had a wee bit more serious, but that's for one happening than that, I can tell you. And that's maybe one of the things that we've all learnt in this part of the world, you know, given our history, our recent history. Yeah,
it's interesting not to make light of any of your experience whatsoever. There's a book, famous book called The Obstacle is the Way, and it kind of talks about that the challenges and the things that the hands that you've been dealt can actually end up being your superpower. And I was thinking whenever you were talking about the juries, how actually your working class background has actually served you very, very well.
Yeah.
And that's a wonder. That's a really lovely thing.
Yeah, oh no, I think absolutely, and it gives you an understanding. I mean, it's one of the problems the royal family have, for instance. And I mean, I've acted for a number of members, and it's just they have been deprived of the experience, the knowledge, and the understanding that brings of, you know, mixing with people, you know, and it's not their fault. They just were never given that opportunity, and as a result, they are unable, in my opinion, for the most part, certainly the older generation, to communicate. Now, the Queen herself was an exception because she played the role of monarch to the letter. And she had to do it, but she was able to, she lived in a different time period. We're now living in a completely different scenario. And the public are very unforgiving. You know, I've sort of spent my life trying to utilise and act before a court of law. But now, more and more, increasingly, I'm battling in the court of public opinion.
Really interesting point.
And it is the court of public opinion, you know, is a very harsh judge, particularly in the era of social media. But that's really what we certainly in my world, that is as important
Yeah.
as any court flaw.
You know, I mean, I'm sure you've talked till the cows come home about cancel culture, but you know, there are people who once cancelled, it's very, very hard to come back from, and that's the court of public opinion, like you talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy. Your lunch with W.J. Walker.
Yeah.
What did that do for you? What did he say? Was there anything you took away from that?
Yeah, well, I sort of did. I was much less perplexed than he was because I just sort of, I was up for anything, give it a go. And I never really, to be frank, I suppose my feeling and probably the reason why I'm going into these things and I've got it, I don't really think too far ahead.
Yeah.
I tend to just see the problem, work out what can be done there and now. I'm not, I have no toleration for people that put things off or push them back. I like things done right away.
Yeah.
Then now and hit them. So when I met with him, it was just it was the moment that I was hitting with, and he was great crack. I really enjoyed it, and he just kept shaking the head, saying, look, I've never had this before. And he was a man, I don't know, probably well into his career, shall we say. So he'd probably seen quite a bit. But I just said, look, I really fancy the Caribbean. I've never been there. I think it would be a nice, be a much better climate than Belfast.
That's very funny. So, I mean, it kind of like loosely ties into this. Kind of post-COVID, the idea that you can run a business in a place like Belfast and have international customers and clients, that makes sense. Pre-COVID, I think it's really interesting that you were able to manage all of these international clients right here. Did you ever have an LA premise, or did you ever kind of spend significant portions of your career overseas? And if so, why did you come back here? Why is being rooted to this place important to you?
Well, I mean, I do very little work in Northern Ireland, very little work. We've had a few profile cases which the media have reported. Most of our work comes into London, our London office, and then it's channeled into Dublin, where the social media platforms are headquartered nowadays, and that would be the main one of it. We have our main base here in Belfast because this is my home, this is my country, and the lawyers, we have the highest quality lawyers you'll get anywhere in the world here, and all my lawyers have got those two qualities that I mentioned earlier, male,
Judgment,
female,
and
or whatever,
backbone,
and so. Whereas in terms of being around, I travel a lot. I mean, I'm in California quite a bit, East Coast of the States, Middle East, France. I have to travel quite a bit. And as I say, I spend my week, maybe 1 day, 2 days in London, maybe 1 day in Dublin and a couple of days in Belfast, really depending. I've been spending, just for different reasons, more time in Belfast recently this summer than I normally would. But I spend all my time chasing my own tail, going around, as I keep saying to everybody, Belfast, London, Dublin. At the end of the week, my wife used to say, who would be much more commercial, and I would be asking me, what have you achieved? I mean, what have you done? What have you earned in the business? And sometimes I'm sitting there like a schoolboy going, I'm really not sure what I've earned money. But I said, a few good challenges. But, maybe in terms of remuneration, maybe it doesn't reflect, shall we say, the amount of work that I've actually been putting into it. But the nature of my work, I've got to go to the client still, as I say. I never lose sight of the fact that I'm only a service provider.
Yeah.
And no matter how much publicity I get, I mean, I've been to pajama parties at Hugh Hefner's mansion. I've been on Tom Cruise, a set with Tom Cruise many times. I've had lunch at Buckingham Palace numerous occasions. I've done all those things.
Sure.
Bottom line is, I'm just a service provider.
Yeah.
I've got to travel to the clients, got to try to provide a service to them. And, at the end of the day, you try to do your best and you try to win.
Yeah.
Or should I say, you make sure you win.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the phrase that is kind of going through my head at the minute is, you're the kind of guy who fits the definition of the love of the game.
Yeah. And
that's the thing that lights you up. And even just seeing, it's emanating out of you.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it is still. I mean, I sometimes wonder. I look in the mirror some mornings after I've had very little sleep and go, right, is there another day left in me? Can I do this one more time, one last time? It's a bit like the boxer. I remember I got some incredible analogies from the late Barney Eastwood, and sometimes the boxers, he used to always say, once they're knocked out, once they hit the canvas, they're never really the same again. They've always got to keep going forward. They're all good going forward. And I suppose that analogy applies to me, touch wood. I haven't been knocked yet, but of course that could be any time, any day, any hour or whatever. But, you've just got to keep going forward, keep charging after it. And the whole thing is, the worst thing you can do in my world is put yourself in a position where you can only react. You've got to be proactive. You've got to go forward the whole time. Think out, if your client's got a good case, you make sure you get it out there and you go on the attack. If he hasn't got a good case, you get it resolved, or you don't start it and you advise him bluntly. You've got to make sure you make these decisions. My trouble is, I've acted for some very controversial people over the years. Like, as I say, I act for people accused of abuse and victims of abuse. Probably more the latter. I've got record settlements for them, but as an officer of the court, I take the view that everyone is entitled to justice. And in the early stages, particularly when you're acting for these people, I have no way of knowing who's telling the truth and who's not, because there have been many, many innocent people who have been caught up in this, who, if I were being, totally objective, if somebody's accused, you would walk away. Everyone is entitled to legal representation. Doesn't matter what they've done, what they could have done, or whatever, because if once the day that's taken away, we can forget about our democracy, we can forget about fairness in society, we can forget actually about just even existing, because we might as well, it's a free-for-all for everybody. And that's whenever, people start to storm the White House.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of questions for me to close, and then we'll go to you, Roscoe, for the closing question.
I haven't got my gun.
Can you turn it on?
No.
Well, then I will do the closing question. In your career so far, what has been the most challenging moment, and how have you overcome it?
I think there have been many challenging moments. Ironically, one of them is happening at the moment as we speak. As I said, there are people trying to undermine me for their own purposes. I've been quite fortunate in my 40-year career that, I get the same respect back that I give to people. I've had difficulties with one with a national broadcaster, and whenever my book comes out in January, you'll get the full story.
Oh, great. I didn't know you had a book. That's fab.
Yeah,
great.
So from Hollywood with one
One
L,
L.
to Hollywood with two L's and
Class.
other tweed suits. But it's, that they tried to take me out, and that was resolved. And then this other scenario I'm dealing with. So that is and remains a big challenge for me. The other challenge I've had is probably, I think I would have to go back probably to the Eastwood case, because everybody thought we were going to get destroyed in it. And, I just knew. I knew from the outset, Barney Eastwood knew from the outset we were going to win it. He was the epitome of backbone. Because Barney used to love going into the witness box. Absolutely loved it. He was the opposite of most clients. We had to hold him back and persuade him not to go in, and he loved the cut and thrust. To him was very appealing. But that would have been definitely my most, I think, still, and that's 1991, 92. So what are we talking about? 30 years ago, and that still remains the same. I don't think I could say that there were other challenges. The rest, we managed to find a slot for.
Fab. Roscoe, quick idea for you. See if you stop recording on the Zoom, you should be able to turn your mic on. Then we'll get you in for the last one, because I always like to have you in there, man.
Want me to pick the audio somewhere?
No, just go for it. See how we go.
Okay.
We're going to take a risk. Experiment here. Final question for me, Paul.
We've taken the risk, and let's see if it works out.
Let's see. Most successful moment of your career so far, like a real punch the sky, like elated.
That's probably an even more difficult one to answer. And again, I suppose I'm going back to Eastwood again. When the jury came back with 450,000. Probably one of the best was a case I did for Rosanna Davison, former Miss World, against Ryanair. This was in Dublin, and she had been accused by Ryanair being racist in a comment she made, and Ryanair wouldn't settle, fought till the end. So we went into court and we had a vicious 1 week battle. Judge threatened to stop the case on a number of occasions, and she was quite controversial. The jury was a 12-person jury in Dublin as opposed to 7 in Belfast. And with difficulty with one or two of the jurors, and the judge intervened And eventually, and I just didn't know what way I was going to go. But I just fought. We just fought it till the end, and we got 80,000 Cheers Award in the end.
Class.
It wasn't as large as I was hoped for, but it gave her absolute vindication.
Yeah.
And in fairness, Ryanair contacted me within days afterwards and said, "Look, no hard feelings," and I've been there on their legal panel ever since. And Michael O'Leary, with regards a friend, I think he's one of the best operators in the business. He's one businessman I've got nothing but absolute admiration for. He's absolutely a real character. He should have been on stage if he wasn't the success he is as a comedian. But we have a great crack together in many of the battles we've done.
But that's the kind of the cool thing about being so focused on being a world-class service provider is game respects game, you know, and your opposition be like, hey, this guy's pretty good. Let's get him on our side next time, you know. Well,
I'm good at creating perceptions. Let's put it that way.
Over to you, my man.
All right. If you can go back in a time machine to when you were 18 years old, what would you say?
I would say I would probably have chosen a different career with hindsight, probably. But if I did do that, I think I would have regretted it. So I think probably at 18, I would think, yeah, you made the right decision, even though it was my mother who would have to take full responsibility for pushing me in that direction. I mean, my eldest son, none of my 4 kids want to do law. And my eldest son said, look, absolutely didn't like the long hours I worked. I mean, 15, 16-hour days didn't appeal to him. So he decided to become a doctor and specialise in respiratory and infectious diseases. So you can imagine what he was doing over the past 3 or 4 years.
Goodness gracious.
In the front line in the NHS and hospitals. But I think he still would say that he's got the better deal. Absolutely. But as I say back then, yes, he's saving lives.
Unbelievable. Paul, I've absolutely loved this. Really, really colourful, really insightful. Always love learning things, and you've had an incredible career. I love that you're so proud to come from Belfast. I love that so much of your business is based out of here, and I really appreciate you giving us your time today. Thank you.
Great to talk to you guys. Thank you very
much.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we hope to see you again next time. Sure. That is a wrap.
Good show.
Amazing stuff. Just want to give one final thanks to NI Connections for making today's episode possible. You can sign up for their free email newsletter at niconnections.com, where you'll get straight to your inbox interesting stories from people who are from this place but are living and working overseas. You'll also get some really interesting insider information about best practices of how to move back home or how to start a business here and all this other really, really interesting stuff. niconnections.com is the place to do that, and we're so grateful that we're able to keep this series going thanks to NI Connections support. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for checking out the podcast. Cheers.